between the lines, I ain't blind. We unwind what they're really saying, genetically modify what you're tasting. Loan you that college promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics, keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid, you're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Rogueways is excited to bring back our dear friend and resident sage. This man is somehow mortal while also managing to accomplish as much as at least the semi-devine. Alan Cicco returns tonight to enlighten us about the many approaches to alchemy throughout all time and across all traditions. Alan is a student of life and everything in it, including death. A thanatologist, a priest, a practitioner, a seeker, a teacher, a writer, and a paranormal expert. He's written many a book, hunted spirits in many a locale, runs the Red Lotus Temple, and teaches plenty of students, including myself. Alan, it is so good to have you. How is this realm treating you today?
It's the realm of impermanence, so it's an ever-present shadow on my back. But
totally. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's it's a world of learning. So yeah.
Well said. Before we get started, I like to remind people that they can support Rogueways best at subscribestar.com/rogue-ways. And you can also check out the website rogueways.org for more content from me. Thank you so much to all of you who support, super chat, donate through PayPal, and all of the ways that people support me. I really appreciate you guys out there. But this is an exciting episode, so let's get into it. And Alan, we always start with a pointless question of the episode. So I was going to ask you, because I know you do, I don't even know which martial art it is, but I know you do one. I always forget which, but I was going to ask you what your favorite pose is. First of all, which one is it, and what's your favorite pose?
Oh, well, real quick, they're saying that my voice is doubled in a chat room. Is it still doubled, everybody?
Oh. Let me remove something.
Wait for someone to let me know.
Okay, it should be better now.
Okay.
All right, sorry. Thank you for letting us know. Perfect.
It says they said yes.
Well, when you first asked them, I hadn't yet fixed it, but then I did fix it.
Okay.
So it should be good, but let us know if it's not still.
The system that I work within is Kung Fu, the Chinese system, but it's also melded with Tibetan martial arts. And the favorite pose is the crane. Definitely the crane, which has even within the system of cranes, there's like 3 to 4 variations even of that. But I really love the elongated posturing, the piercing techniques of it, and the balance that it acquires as with the creature itself. Just a lot of grace involved, and it's of course an animal based on air. And being a Libra, I'm very mind oriented, almost to my detriment sometimes. So there's a lot of correlating symbolisms there.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Cranes are one of my favorite birds, so I love that answer. And I would share my favorite pose, but I don't have a practice, so I can't. So I'll just go with yours. Well, I guess, so we're going to just jump right into it. And I guess we both just woke up this morning and decided we needed to do this show tonight, which is funny.
Divine inspiration.
Right. We didn't plan it or anything. And then this morning you're like, why don't we do something like this? And I was like, hey, okay. And today was the best day. So here we are doing this on a Wednesday, and it's awesome. And I love it. But we're going to talk about the many alchemic traditions. And to be honest, you were the first person who told me at some point in the past and reminded me again today that there are more than one alchemic tradition, because I had just thought this was one thing. So, maybe you can kind of tell us just about how many there are, or the sort of general background.
Sure. Well, the alchemic traditions are, it's so almost unnerving when you start getting into the repetitiveness you see in the world traditions.
Yeah.
That this idea of, well, with what a lot of people understand with the more, I guess you could call it Western or Hellenistic type of Renaissance alchemy, the
Yeah.
Ouroboros, the bubbling cauldron, the flames, the as above, so below, the Hermetic traditions, which
Yeah.
everybody is very familiar with. But those symbolisms, you keep finding them, or I should say, I do, and then I found through literature, you keep finding them repeated around the world. Every time I would go, and of course, I've been studying world belief systems for now it's going on 38 years.
Yeah.
And so every time I would focus on one, I would be like, okay, what's the exoteric tradition and what's the esoteric tradition? And it sometimes took a while to dig through and get into it. And really within the last 10 years with the internet's popularity, or no, last 15, 20 years, really it's been a deluge of documents that have been put out there that were, occultic and hidden for very long. And some of them are by just random or divine chance, or by one person's desire to get these teachings out there. Like, for instance, the Golden Dawn material with the Secretary of Crowley saving all the thrown away notes and then publishing a whole book on it.
Wow.
So, you have these traditions that are being brought out of, using the pun, the dark ages into the light.
Yeah.
And when you look at, you know, African, Islander, Asiatic plateau, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai, Burmese, Tibetan, especially India, of all the places, especially India, you see the Sufis, the Islamic traditions, which the Sufis are the more esoteric variation. Everybody knows the Sufis because of Rumi,
And the
the one
whirling
poet,
dervishes.
the whirling dervishes, yeah. And all of these people and these traditions produce corpus material that to the uninitiated, it seems like poetry, but to the initiated, you have the keys to unlock. Oh, when they talk about being drunk, they're blissful because they're working areas of the body that are producing hormones, which are giving you a high. When they talk about fire and love, they're talking about the internal heat or the bioelectrical energy of the body is being solidified, purified, and then transforming the spirit of the being. And this is what the true, there's two types of alchemy. There's the physical with materials, and then there's the internal esoteric version as opposed to the exoteric version.
Right.
And the esoteric is what is guarded for so long because, I mean, well, they guard the other one too, because if everybody can have gold, then you get rid of the ruling class and the stratification of people.
Good point.
But the same thing happens also when you have these esoteric traditions that give people very deep levels of gnosis or knowledge about the human psyche and emotions and the spirit. And so you have light and dark alchemy. And right now in this time in this world, there's an awful lot of dark alchemy that's going on, that's producing, well, you can see the results worldwide, and that's just from a small group of ruling class people using it.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, if the rest of the population adopts this practice, it's going to create a cesspool on earth, really.
Right. I was going to say, this is part of, I guess, the double-edged sword of having, like you said, all these texts sort of emerge from the esoteric, from the dark into the light via the internet and via this sort of whatever mass cultural exchange we're undergoing, one of the benefits is that people have access now to all this information and they can learn a lot. And like, you know, I'm sure you have used a lot of this for good and shared a lot of it for good, but then there's just as many people who probably get a hold of some of it and apply it in a very negative way, or misunderstand it, or misuse it, or, you know, if you're not sort of in a place where you can use a tool well, then you probably shouldn't have a tool, right?
Well, you know, if someone's job is with a hammer, they're going to see everything as a nail.
True.
and you know, one of the really biggest corruptions of the alchemic tantric variation is the whole tantric sex,
Yeah.
which was about, that's like, you have the singular personal sealed vessel alchemy, tantra,
Yeah.
and then down here is, okay, I'm doing karma tantra with a partner, because we want to raise up the energy and then cycle the energy through our body and bring it through the various chakras of our body and raise our consciousness together, exchanging energies. And so that's why it's such a blissful experience, because there's a deep rooted emotional connection. But now people are like, oh, great, I can go without orgasming for 3 hours. Well, yeah, but you're missing the reason of why you're doing that.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the rest of the alchemic process of what you do with the energy, where you move it, what you should be looking to feel. And this is the problem with the uninitiated getting hold of materials and looking at it and going, oh, everything I'm reading is what I can hold in my hand. But they don't realize you can't grasp all the material. It's very abstract and symbolic. And this is the whole reason it's couched in symbolism many times, is because they don't want these, worldlings getting hold of this stuff and contorting it to something that's,
just debased or misused.
Just debasing it.
Well, there's something too that I feel like I can read something, read a text, I can get a lot out of it, I can sort of mentally play with it, but if it's combined with symbolism or an image, which you've shared some with me that help me sort of see how these things, it settles in sort of deeper, and so I can see how you can take these symbols and these images and get something deeper out of it, but at the same time I can see how you could look at them without the sort of right approach and get something totally different, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure. Well, of course, you look at the snake eating its tail, which is about the cycle of feeding and energy in the body, etc. And someone would go, oh, well, obviously they're worshiping snake demons. That has nothing. And that's like someone who's really outside of tradition, totally contorting it into something that it's not, to be used as a vehicle to now burn people at the stake.
Well, that's another good reason to hide some things, as if someone's going to kill you for it.
See, when during the expansion of Islam came into India in the 11th and 12th century, there was all these statues of what's called a yidam, which is a male-female people combined together, and many times they looked wrathful, demonic, and they saw these statues and thought, oh my God, these people are worshiping copulating demons, and they just exterminated Buddhism in India completely. The only reason the tradition actually continued along was because it had spread to the other Asiatic areas, most specifically in its most literal corpus encyclopedic form is in Tibet. And that's why I've been able to learn a lot of these traditions, is because I've been able to get hold of these Tibetan texts. I can understand some of it, but a lot of it's been translated into English. And if you've been given the keys, you can read something and go, oh, okay, that's what the heck they're talking about. And a lot of these texts have, ancient artwork that's been drawn out with beautiful pigments made from ground up gemstones and everything like that. Or you have the hanging wall tankas, which are these beautiful silk tapestries, and they have complete systems of these psycho-spiritual alchemic practices in like one literal image. And if you're inducted through the system, you can look at the image and go, okay, I'm supposed to be doing this, focusing here, hold my hand like this, look inward to these areas of the body, use these special mantric seeds and resonate myself to vibrate at a certain frequency. And so you have these traditions that have been passed down for, well, one of the supposed longest standing traditions is in the indigenous Bun belief system of Tibet, which is very similar to the Taoist tradition of China, the very rooted belief system, which is shamanic, which is of course very ecstatic, alchemic based, many times using materials to get even a greater high and blissful experience. And they say that it goes back 18,000 years.
Wow.
So now you're getting into this idea of not only are you looking at the era when the Great Flood happened, which was probably a meteor strike, but then you're going to the generation before that that had all this psycho-spiritual technology that's been
building pyramids,
that's been that's been embedded. And of course the Egyptians had an alchemic text, the Greeks had it, the Islam, the Taoist, the indigenous shamanic traditions.
What about because you when you were sort of listing all of these, I don't know if you mentioned any like South American or North American, but I know those probably are included, right? Those sort of native traditions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because you have the shamanic journey that these people go on, and they many times use totemic magic to embody the spiritual tradition of an animal. Like in Kung Fu, we use totemic animals as a form of movement and expression and dance. And this dance puts you into a higher consciousness to then transform the body and purge it of negativity and take on the spiritual essence to do battle with the inner demons as well as the external demons and unify you as a more holistic person. And that's why these people were looked to as the leaders in their community. But as we've been, and really this goes back to the religious purges of the orthodoxy belief systems that arose of the monotheistic traditions, and also the industrial eras where this really took a big hit.
Can I clarify then? So because it seems to me like those monotheistic traditions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they all also have these things, right?
Do.
Okay, so it's weird.
And of course, we'll see, the problem is I guess you could call it the aesthetic traditions of their belief systems were brutally repressed and murdered and destroyed by the more exoteric orthodoxy systems that don't want people having this gnosis or this knowledge. And that's why you have these traditions are many times couched in this symbolic language. It's a survival technique. Like with the various Celts that were conquered by the conquering Romans and Christians, the Celts, when they were carving all the cathedrals, would carve their deities into the work, like the goblins and men in green. So when they were praying to their deities, but they subtly hid it amongst the architecture, which is still there today.
It's fascinating that Rome just seemed to come along and sort of ruin the whole world. You know? Well,
when you have such a large world system, it's going to crush almost inevitably individualism underneath its wheels.
Yes.
And that's what you see today. They don't like grounded people. They don't like people that can say, well, hold on a second, you know, I don't want to adopt your negativity, or I don't want to adopt the group think. What, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to? Well, why do you want me to?
Right.
You know, it's
Why
a
can't I
very
just be me?
right. Why
Yeah.
can't I just, ironically, but see, the problem is they want to sell individualism as a prepackaged commodity, which
Yeah.
isn't individualism at all.
No.
It's when you're, you know, you're belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, you're doing these alchemic practices, you are grounding and rooting yourself. That's why when you go to the military, you suck your belly in and stick your chest out. It's unhealthy breathing.
And you shave your
It
head.
uproots.
Yeah.
Yeah, it uproots you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they strip you of individualism, and that's the reason they're doing it, is because they want to take the you out and put them into you.
Yes.
And so that's why, I mean, that's one of the reasons why there are not a lot of people who are ecstatics, who have blissful experiences, or are high all the time on a DMT like trip, because you can't deal with the structure of society very
Yeah.
well with it.
You don't fit
They,
in when you're in
right
that
now,
state.
if you're in a tribal setting, they'd expect you to be like that all the time, to tell them what to do on a spiritual plane. But with here, you know, they want to squash that right away, and they don't want you being grounded. They don't want you being happy with just breathing.
Yeah.
That's why nobody, you know, all babies start out belly breathing.
Yeah, it's natural. I want to
It's very
clarify
natural.
too what you're saying about the military. We're not saying that they came upon this by accident. They absolutely know, whoever they is, whoever designed this process and this method knows exactly what it's doing on a spiritual
Yeah.
and psychological, physical, all the levels. It's not an accident. But I want to ask, is there any religious tradition or any sort of spiritual tradition you've ever found that doesn't relate to the alchemic process and tradition?
Because I look at it with different eyes, I can look at any tradition and see the alchemic process involved in it. There's nothing, to me, I almost feel sad when I see people and they don't understand the depth that their tradition goes to. And so for me, I literally could walk into a room of whatever practitioners, and I would be doing an alchemic version of whatever they were telling me, and reprocessing the energy, the teaching and the words and the written scriptures in a manner that is alchemic.
Yeah.
Because it's the root of what everything is, and what it gets back to is light. It's about light every single time. Fire, heat, the sun, gold, yellow, purifying. It's about light every single time. And when you get back to the oldest traditions of these very ancient hermetic alchemic texts, it's about invigorating the spirit, or the light essence, the light body, purifying it and being reborn again. That's why baptism and being reborn is about changing the way the mind operates and the mind works, so that you look inwards towards your light body. And you know, these texts go back to, there are texts that go back to 2, 3, 4, 5,000 BC that talk about this stuff, you know, that have been passed down from generation, usually within the priestly class. But they found statues in various ancient civilizations of people sitting in yogic and meditative positions. And these cultures didn't really have a religious institutional area in their ruins. The statues gave the idea that in the old days, you weren't worried about commercialism and careerism, you'd have a few hours you did your agrarian duties, but the rest of the time you could denote to the inner sciences of the body and the mind. And so that's why these cultures, you found these statues of meditating yogic people that are still practiced today, and martial arts as well.
And it gives the impression that this was just sort of everywhere, dispersed throughout society, and so no matter where you were, this was sort of in your mind and in your processes.
Yes.
And
yeah, the whole culture was doing it. So you, as you can imagine, a whole like 1,000-person city, everybody focused on meditation. That's what a utopia would be.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have all this war,
Yeah.
all this arguing, all this, you know, civil unrest. You wouldn't have people screaming about whatever. It would be, hey, I want to go back and do some meditation, do some yoga, do some breathing. I want to just stare at the stars, because alchemy gets into not only internal, but the external movements of the cosmos and unifying yourself with it.
As above, so below. Well,
And that's exactly, yes.
Yeah. This is exactly what I'm kind of trying to say whenever people are sort of raging and like, what are we supposed to do and how do we stop this and how do we fix this? I'm like, I know it doesn't sound real, but it's true that what you do is you focus on yourself and you work on yourself, your spiritual self. You work on that, and whatever that way means to you as your beginning is whatever, but it'll take you everywhere. It'll take you to the point you need to be, and that is what transforms all of society. Just like you're describing this golden age, if everyone's doing that, there is no way for things to not be good and positive, because everybody is in a state of balance and positivity. And so it really is, I think, the answer for me. It seems pretty obvious to me.
I wanted to respond to a couple comments in the chat really quick.
Yeah.
Somebody said maybe this internal alchemy is why there's spontaneous combustion, and this person is exactly right. The human body, I want to get into what's called biophotons.
Cool.
and biophotons really came to the forefront by this German scientist, Govish, German or Swedish, I think it's German, in the mid-19th century. Biophotons are light emitted by cells and the body. And plants do this too, because they've seen from outer space glowing green fields, and they didn't know what they were picking up because there was no cities in the areas. And it's because the plants are emitting these biophotons. And millions of cells every day die and are reborn, but it only takes a couple biophotons to change the structure and movement of the internal dynamics of the body. And these photons are emitted during cellular respiration and building and separating, because when you look at a cell, when it's separating, it looks like this, which looks like the Earth's polarities.
Yeah.
Because it's beginning to separate. And you have those, and that's also when you look at the alchemic tradition, you have the core of the body, and it comes up, it goes down and back around and comes back up under again. And that's going back thousands and thousands of years. They knew this before any modern science ever caught up.
They probably could see it.
Yeah, and this is the best part. So we glow ourselves when what's the name of it's the Kobayashi Institute. They did pictures of people and plants, and they found that the most biophotons are emitted where you have pattern and structure. And of course, when things are harmonious, you have more structure and solidity. So the biophotons are moving more freely, which is why when you're negative and sick, your energy is low. But plants, because they have a consistent structure and they're not as I mean, we look
Mentally.
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we're big tube worms with arms and legs and fingers and everything.
Right.
When you have the plants will emit more biophotons, but a human being, the one place where they come out really a lot is fingernails, because fingernails are a solid mass that's very structured and linear and grow out. And that's why in the photography, you see the fingertips many times emit a lot of energy from there, which is why people do their energy work with their hands and their fingertips.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
It's why it's so important.
It's why I probably instinctually, when I'm like blessing my water, I go in like a clockwise motion with my fingertips.
Yep,
like
100%.
Instilling my energy into it.
as soon as you're hurt, you bring your hand up to it.
True,
Ouch.
Yeah.
And you put your hand on it, and you mentally instantly feel better.
Yes.
So these
I like visualize my fingers like stitching back together the cut, or like, reducing the swelling. Like,
and this is why that's so cool. When people, and they tested this with non-meditators and meditators, when you meditate, you emit less external biophotons because your focus is internally.
Oh, wow.
So your energy is staying inside your body.
That makes sense.
And you can cause cellular structures to change with just a few biophotons. So when you're internalizing meditation and you're going inward, you literally are changing the structure of your being. Now, I want to also preface this, that's not this new age version of this that I'm talking about, where it's like, just change your mind, this kind of like cotton candy version of it. I'm talking real hardcore, dedicated meditation and stillness and focusing inward. Now,
can I add really quickly that part? I think part of what's different about that is that, especially if you're like beginning this work, I think that a lot of like negativity can come up. If you've suppressed negativity in your past, I think that can come up and will come up. And I think some of the sort of like new agey love and light crew is like, no, it's all like bliss and it's all good and we're all just peace here. And if you force yourself into a fake peace and a fake happy, that's not, I think, doing you as much good. And so I think that's one of the differences I just want to throw out there for people to think about. It's not necessarily always like easy, happy, like gumdrops.
Well, you're exactly right, because what will happen is that energy that you haven't dealt with in your mind will surface some other way, and it will become neuroses.
Yeah.
Or, a sickness of the neural pathways of the brain, and it'll come out in other ways, like people will become so love and light that they become a doormat for people.
Yeah.
And it's a form of masochism of hurting themselves.
Yes.
So there's no as above, so below, no balance.
Right. Sorry if I distracted you.
No, that's fine. But, a couple of the people that, so as I was going to also say, so the ancient traditions, what is sometimes called the Mahamudra or Dzogchen traditions of Tibet and India in the Buddhist tradition, really go beyond the Buddhism. It's about light and light therapy and internal alchemy of the body. And you visualize various chakric centers and you try to purge those centers of blockages or nadis or knots. And then the free flow of energy can help raise the consciousness and raise up in a, when you focus the photons inward, it can change the way electrons are being expressed in the body and create energy, which can actually change the resonation of them. Mm-hmm. That's where the actual expression of vibrate higher comes from. It's not like the new agey fluff version. You literally are doing it, but there's steps to where you have to do it. It's not just you can change it all of a sudden because you read some book on it. You have to sit down and thoroughly work your way through it so it becomes an actual grounded practice, and you can feel the results over a period of time because you're incrementally purging and changing the structure of your body on an actual molecular level. And that's really what they're talking about with the biophotons and changing electrons and how the molecules are changing, cellular respiration, cellular process. You can just make your whole body healthier, which is also why it helps create more cells, and the longevity of the cells and these practices involved with light can extend longevity, which gets into talking about the practices in the Taoist Chinese tradition of the immortals, because they, and then also in the Buddhist traditions talking about achieving a rainbow body when you leave your body.
Yeah.
And so light every
Yeah.
time is what it goes back to.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I have a really random question. I hope it's not going to totally throw you off, but when you're talking about light and biophotons and plants emitting these biophotons as well, I just had this random thought about crop circles, and I was wondering what you think about the idea that I know there's some man-made crop circles, really advanced ones and really simple ones with like boards and stuff. I think they both occur, but I think there's some that are actually legitimate as well. And do you think that they could be from like the actual plants, biophotons, like somehow accumulating and like making this process to try to communicate with us or some other entities? Or
well, I mean, that's I mean, you can that's a good question. That's a good theory. That's a good theory of, I mean, it could be picking up on something, and there's a chain reaction, and it just sets in motion because
symbolic expression of some communication of some form.
Sure. I mean, the earth resonates. The earth is alive in a certain sense. I mean, there's a whole reason it's alive, and it's glowing, and it's emitting its own photons outwardly more than human beings are. So and that's why also they can affect us when we have plants in our environment and plants in our surrounding.
I mean, my plants know me. I know they know when I'm around, and they know me, like they respond. I can tell.
Yep. Well, you can, I mean, if you sit with them long enough, you can see them actually move.
Yeah, they'll like move towards you. It's a trip.
Yep. The better the music, the better the atmosphere, the more that you talk to them and send them love and light.
Yeah.
They're responding to it just like human beings do. Yeah. People hate to be treated like crap. Interesting.
Especially even I feel like some of us who are sensitive to these things, like I can just tell when someone doesn't like me or looks down on me, and even if they're treating me supposedly well, I'm like, I don't want to be around you anymore. Like, I think plants are the same, and probably all beings are the same, because there's information and energy that's being transferred, whether you're saying it or not.
Well, I mean, you look at animals. A dog will or a cat will just hiss immediately at somebody that you bring into the environment, which is how pet owners many times can tell, oh, this isn't a good person for me to be dating. My dog or cat hates this person I just brought in. Like, really? You're going to let your pets determine who you date? Yeah, they're a pretty good judge of character.
I trust them more than most people.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. And so, yeah, if you look at even some of the ancient traditions, like with the Christian mystics, this goes back right to the beginning of the Eastern Orthodox, which is really the foundational practice of how a formulated idea of the Christian dogma came about, and also with the Gnostics in that tradition, which were about the energy of the body, the process of theoria, which is the knowledge aspect of God, and understanding gnosis or gaining wisdom and knowledge. the very mystical versions were called the hesychasts, because the hesychast means it kind of means like stillness. And so it was about centering oneself. And they would go back to the Gospel of Matthew with about go inward to your closet and pray to your God, your Father, in silence. You'll get your rewards that way. Don't go out in public. And they also focused on the prophet Elijah, who would hold his head between his knees to pray, which is where the term a navel gazing comes into. It was a derogatory term because they would focus inward, which was pushing your mind inward to your inner biophotons and connecting yourself with the divine and getting the light from that. So that's why you see many times this crown opening up, their chakras opening up, and that heat is rising up, and that's those biophotons coming off because they're in an elated state. They're purifying themselves. The 14th century mystic called Richard Rolla wrote a book called The Fire of Love, which is about divine fire and mystical tradition. And he put it into 3 levels. The first one is it's like a fire where you bring the head and the heart together and you feel this burning joy and the body sweats and you're on fire, and that's that process again.
Yeah.
And then you reach an elation of joy and you feel ecstatic and heightened, which of course is the hormonal release. And then you hear the voices of angels, or you are connected with the divine, and apotheosis happens to where you become the divine yourself. And when you look at some of the Buddhist traditions, also like in the Pure Land sect, which is one that I trained in thoroughly, you visualize yourself in a type of the cocoon, begins with the C, that the caterpillar wraps itself in.
It's not a chrysalis?
Chrysalis, thank you.
Yeah.
You visualize yourself in a lotus chrysalis being purged of negativity and bathing in the light of these 3 enlightened beings, Mahastam Prapta, Avalokitesvara, Amitabha. And Amitabha is eternal light, and Amitaya is eternal life. And so it's longevity in light biophotons, and you see yourself being purged over time and acquiring also this heat is building up and you're being purged of negativity. And when you start unifying with what's called the pure lands, you start hearing bells and birds and singing. And it's very interesting when you hear it because it comes out of nowhere, and it's so utterly beautiful that you're hearing angelic choirs.
But that would be almost hard for me to stay with it because I'd be like, what the hell is that? And then I'd run away. But I guess by the time you're going to experience that, you're probably pretty ready for it.
Yeah, you're almost like, oh, I can't wait till I finally sense it and can experience that. And of course, if you look at the 11th and 12th century mystic Hildegard von Bingen, which we have, she was an anchorite, which means to basically be on your own. They would live in cells on their own, and were a lot of Christian mystics that way. They could do many saintly activities, such as touching people and healing them, emitting heat from their body. They would draw pictures of flames coming out of their eyes, out of their ears, out of their mouth. They would visualize halos and glowing orbs around them. So many of these Christian mystics are the same way. When you look to the Sufi traditions, which involves the alchemy, you see them focusing on dancing together, repeating mantras over and over called a zikr, using prayer rope like the hesychasts would use, dancing certain ways, reciting prayers, and a constant bobbing and a type of putting yourself into an ecstatic position to bring about this elation that unifies you with the divine and purges you of negativity.
It's almost like a trance state that you put yourself into.
100%. Yeah. And so, sorry, looking at some of the comments. And so the flames coming out is something that's repeated also. When you look at the traditions of the Hermetic traditions, which the main proponent that a lot of people give credence to is Hermes.
Right.
Trismegistus, I think is how you pronounce it, who is very prevalent. The teachings circulated in the Renaissance and Reformation eras. You see that there's a lot of what's called the solve et coagula, which is to distill and then put back together again. And it's a chemical alchemic process of dissolving your own psyche and putting it back together with enlightened qualities or enlightened principles. And that involves, of course, astrology, theurgy, which is with the divinities, then the apotheosis of becoming divine yourself. So there's and this goes back so far. You even see traditions in Etruscan, which is BC era, carvings on a funeral urn. You see this pillar, which represents fire in their symbolism, and it's being guarded by warriors. So the fire was a form of symbolic of wisdom and knowledge. And ironically, the people that they're guarding it from is like the elitist rich people. So this knowledge is not for these rich, dumbed down people that already have their rewards. It's for the warriors and the internal priestly class. So you saw that too.
Wow. Yeah, it really seems like it's everywhere. And it's so interesting to me, and it's been so interesting to me when I think about alchemy, that there is this external, and even the external version I don't think is very exoteric or just sort of available to everyone, right? But there's this external alchemy and there's this internal alchemy. So there's the physical and then there's the spiritual, and they're exactly mirrored. And like that alone, I think, gives a lot of credence to the entire philosophy and practices, because why should there be anything that if you do it exactly in this way to a physical substance, it produces the most pure, clean, crystallized essence of that thing, and then it also works on a spiritual level for people. Like I don't know if there's very many examples of something exactly like that. It just, every time I think about it, it kind of blows my mind.
And that's why these truths are carried for so long, and just they repeat. There's a lot of people talk about universal truths, and there's not a lot of universal truths. There's a lot of relative truths that a lot of people talk about, but ultimate truths that carry across thousands and thousands and thousands of years of history, that's something you can look to and go, okay, this actually has a lot of merit to it.
Like a lot of people put a lot of energy into this. Carrying it on,
and
keeping it true, like all of that.
Protecting it from any interloper that would get hold of it and not know exactly what they're doing or why.
Well, I have to say that some of the things you've taught me, I've had other people ask me if I could share with them, and I've said, well, no, I can't. And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, I'm not supposed to. Like, and they're like, well, what is the value of something if you can't share it freely? And I was like, well, that is the value of it, honestly. And it's not an elitist thing. I'm not like, oh, I'm better than you, or this other person's better than you, or, it's that I'm honoring a tradition that I was taught. And in that tradition, I'm not supposed to just hand it out freely to anyone who comes asking. And so what would you say to that idea that this should be not guarded, it should be given to anybody, especially if they ask for it?
Well, it goes along the same lines of people like, when they see, for instance, I will be at a computer at the library and I'll stand up and stretch really quick and reach down and put my palms on the floor to lean over and stretch out my back. Oh my gosh, I wish I could do that. Do you? Do you really? Because it takes
'Cause you can.
dedication, it
Yeah.
takes years. You can do it. Oh, well, will you show me? Do you really want me to show you? Because I don't want you to waste my time, because I take this very seriously.
Yes.
And if you think it's like, oh, I'm just going to throw this into my collection of things, then you're not actually honoring it. Now,
Right.
if I know you for a year or two and I realize you're actually serious about wanting to learn this, you repeatedly ask me, you show interest, you maybe go and do some research.
And you're not just like
okay.
a random piece of trash floating along.
Well, you're just not a grifter,
Yeah.
you know? Oh, I'm just going to, pick up a little bit of this here, a little bit of that. It's, it's along the same lines of people who they go to 6 different martial arts places and earn like a white belt. And then they say, oh, I'm going to start my own system. Well, no, you don't even know what you're doing on like not even beyond a beginner's level.
Right.
And so that's why these traditions are kept from the public, because you need to get to know the person who's taken their life to dedicate to these traditions.
Yeah.
And if you truly want to do them, that's fine, but don't just grift in, do a disservice, learn it really quick, and then go on. And then also think you have the capacity to show it to somebody else who's also not going to take it seriously.
Right.
And that's where the degradation of the tradition comes into, which is why a lot of people, like for instance, everybody throws around the word tulpa, but they don't even understand the Sanskrit Tibetan connotation of where the term comes from and what it actually means. And it goes back to thought forms, but it goes back to this practice of the alchemic light. And what happens is you internally focus the light inward, and then you start projecting it outward, and you can start seeing what's called tiglays or bindus, which means circles, and you start seeing flashes of light. Sometimes people see something very similar before they're going to pass out.
Yeah.
They see blinking of light. And that's actually something that in the practice you can be shown how to, with a partner, get that to happen. And before you pass out, you pull yourself back, but you use this externalization of this light to focus your biophotons outward, so you can then manifest things outward. And that's where the thought forms come into. But for people that can create them, it's a very dangerous thing.
I was
because
going to say, I don't
they
think
can take on a life of their own if you
Yeah.
don't get rid of them, and they can actually cause chaos and do things that you're not in control of.
I wouldn't
And
even want to try ever.
Well, just
Like-
even just to see something like that, you can make something like that and it can cause things to happen, but to physically see someone manifest a tulpa in front of you, it's very unnerving, because that's thought that's manifesting in front of you. So you got to know how powerful that person's mind is. And that's why most people that talk about the tulpa tradition are doing so from either magazines, books, movies, like especially after the X-File episode of the tulpa that was killing people in this those areas where they control how everybody lives in their houses, whatever those are called,
like a planned community sort of thing.
One of those communities where they're like, your mailbox has to be this high, and somebody had learned how to do that, and so that's why just no one's really shown that technique unless they go through an extensive period of figuring out if this person's going to be a good candidate, because you don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry or Sally picking up how to do that. It's extremely dangerous and can cause unending amounts of chaos in everybody's life involved in it.
Well, this is why I mean, because I hope no one's out there saying like, "Wow, these guys are a bunch of elitist assholes" or something. Because I don't think that there's anyone who's like sort of not capable or not worthy or whatever. I think anybody can get there. But I think this highlights part of why it's really important to always stay at that. Maybe it's like that beginner's mind sort of thing. But at the very least, you're not like walking around like, "Well, I'm sure this is exactly what a tulpa is, and this is how I'm going to go and make one. I'm going to study this thing and I'm going to figure it out," because I think that there's just so many layers of like misdirection, or at least just people who don't really deeply understand something that are sort of sharing whatever they have gathered. And so it's cool to like learn about these things and gather this information and be like, okay, here's my current understanding. But also to know that you probably don't know the whole story. And another addition to this idea is that this, part of these understandings, and I hope no one's thinking that I'm saying I'm like some advanced, I'm not anything. I barely have like a practice, but like this idea of doing these things kind of is something that helped me understand personally that hierarchy actually is valuable. And I like saying it hurts me, but it's true because I've been trained my whole life to sort of hate authority and hate hierarchy and rebel against it. And I think in the way that it's employed in our world oftentimes is sickening. And so there's a reason why. But I also then have had to come to the point where I realize just like any tool and just like any sort of form or system, there are positive applications and negative applications. And so I've come to respect hierarchy.
Well, and hierarchy, is just tiers of learning.
Right. It's not like it's better than, worse than, like, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just, hey, this person has more experience. They're at, let's say, a master's level.
Right.
I've actually got to learn associates, bachelors,
right.
Year 1,
kindergarten.
2, 3. Right. Kindergarten, but a lot of people want to go from 0 to 100. And it's like, well, if you don't know how to drive a car at 100 miles an hour, you're going to crash. And you're exactly right. Unfortunately, hierarchy can be an extremely abusive thing that people use to really harm a lot of people.
Right.
But of course, like I was saying, a lot of all these traditions worldwide, there's a lot of people that are learning these techniques. It's not like you were saying it's some elitist thing where only a very few are learning it.
Yeah.
There's a good amount of people who are actually learning these techniques, but there's, because of the fast food mentality that we have nowadays, a lot of people don't want to wait to go from 0, 10, 20, 30 miles an hour. It's like, well, there's a reason you've got to internalize the foundational, the base of the pyramid before you work your way to the pinnacle.
Yeah.
It's just about instruction. I mean,
right.
You learn arithmetic first, then algebra, then geometry, then calculus, trig. I mean, there's a reason. And in the old days, it was a hidden methodology because they didn't want people doing it in a confusing manner, not properly learning it, because they honor their tradition and want to practice correctly because they don't want to harm people. They want to make sure, and I'm not trying to be like boogeyman harm, kind of thing like that.
No.
I'm saying harm the tradition as make sure you know what you're doing so you have the full expression of it and get all the goods and bonuses that come from it, because it's something that, like I've said, so many traditions across the board have it. I mean, even more modern traditions, like, just for instance, Wicca. You can even look to the Wicca tradition, and it has alchemic processes involved in it just as much as anybody else, because Gardner, the guy that founded it, drew from old traditions that go extending back a long ways and formulated his own way of doing it. But you still have that evolved in those traditions. It's not anything that's not going to bring about a purification, an illumination, an apotheosis where you become divine and with a divinity. All the traditions have it. You just have to do it well enough and hard enough that you actually get the results you want.
Yeah, that's well said. And do you think that given that this is reflected, this alchemical process, alchemical tradition is reflected in literally everything everywhere, do you think that there is one sort of most prime or most essential or most correct or something form or method or area that people might want to look at? Or are there some that are better than others?
I think really what you get into is everybody's got their own set of eyes and view things differently. So one tradition is going to resonate more with another. And that's the key focus, because that's going to create intensity and focus and direction of the mind. And when that's being done inward, that's where you really get this process to come about. And that's how you know you're going to actually get the results, because embracing a Hindu tradition or a Sufi or a Sikh tradition, that really resonates with you, and all the parameters and the accoutrements that go along with that tradition help you focus a lot more and the intensity rises, then you're going to actually get the results you want. So whatever, depending upon the person's mindset, Westerners have a specific mindset. Really, we're actually kind of lucky in that we're not raised in a tradition I mean,
Not
there
like
is the Christian tradition that a lot of people are in, and they might resonate with that, but we have like all of them available to us in English, so we can kind of go, well, heck, I think I want to go with the Taoist tradition or the Hindu tradition, and we have that availability. Luckily that we're not the linguistic syntax that we use is open to all the traditions. We don't grow up into one where it's like, I can only do, for instance, the Muslim tradition.
Right.
I mean, it's good that if they do that version of alchemy, but if something else resonates with them, then maybe they should move that direction and actually get the results that they want, because it's more familiar to them.
That is such a good answer and so awesome. And it resonates really deeply with all of my experiences. What I really found in life is that whatever I'm sort of looking at the moment that resonates with me, I'm doing it, I'm practicing or whatever. And then at some point it might become like, okay, I kind of have gotten what I can from this. And then I move on, and then something else sort of comes about, and it always adds on to the previous thing, and it always expands me in some way. And now I'm at sort of this point where I sort of see everything that you're describing without any of the knowledge that you have, but I see that these patterns that you're describing, these ideas, they really fit with everything I've seen in this pattern of seeing alchemy everywhere. Like, you're the one who sort of like lifted that veil off my eyes and showed me that, and I was just like, this is crazy actually, that every single thing has these exact same principles rooted into them. And it makes me think of this syncretism. Do you know what syncretism?
Yeah.
So isn't syncretism really just picking up on that pattern and sort of saying like, this is everything?
Yeah, Jung was the one who really formulated the syncretic idea of you're picking up on those universal patterns. In the Buddhist tradition, it's called the Dharmata, or basically like the energetic flow of the universe. And when you get inducted far enough into the tradition, which one of the root things that allows you to get into the tradition to flow within the Dharmata, called entering the stream, is getting rid of clinging to this idea of a solid self. And so you already see selflessness is also a part of letting it all come into you and be filled up with a bigger idea of yourself, and not just this smaller, more finite version of yourself, which is like, I redrew a cave etching that's from the Taoist tradition for my seated Qigong book. You can look up on Amazon and see it. It basically looks like a person holding their belly, and there's a little small human being glowing inside the belly. And that's because you're practicing diaphragmatic breathing, which brings about building up of the chi or the prana or the energy. And when you build it up, you're building up a new form of yourself to be reborn or purified into gold.
It's absolutely awesome. I love seeing this all around the world. And I guess we've kind of touched on it, but what do you think the sort of main benefits to finding practices and philosophies or traditions that resonate with you and taking that on and actually practicing those things?
Well, when, accomplishment means a directed goal, and a directed goal needs direction, and direction means pattern. And so that means a framework. And so you need to find a framework that has an end result you want to move towards, even though the end result with alchemy is expansion into the whole of the universe. You still have to have some way to get on the train and get from point A to B. Right. And so that's why it's good to figure out, what do I like the way this looks? This symbolism is pretty cool to me. I love the language of like the Egyptian Hermetic tradition, or Norse or Greek or whatever. That's what helps a person out get a vehicle for them to actually get from point A to Z and work through all of the letters in the alphabet, which even the alphabet itself is an alchemic formula. So the symbolism is so syncretic constantly through everything, that even language itself can be a vehicle of an alchemic process.
That's really incredible. And that's what I think people, I just went into this recently, but I don't understand it deeply enough, but I touched on it because somebody dropped it in my path and it made sense. But that's the green language and the language of the birds as well, right? Is that idea that this is sort of reflected in every sphere, in every way, all the time.
Yeah. It's so funny when you're actually like, someone goes, oh, here's it's not only a set of keys, but it's an actual skeleton key because it goes in all the various locks, and you can open up a door to whatever and look in and go, oh, that's what's going on in here. I see behind the exoteric facade of what X, Y, and Z. Let's go to the next door. The same thing's going on in here. Okay, you go to the next one, and you just, after a while, you're like, yeah, I mean, like a lot of people will say, all the religious traditions are doing the same thing. To some extent, yeah, they are. It's just, you have a mountain and you have 360 degrees of the mountain, but when we all get to the top, we're staring at the same moon.
Yeah.
So it just depends. Now, of course, a lot of people who are very divisive don't want that unity amongst the traditions. I've even seen this when I've done interfaith conferences, to where people will come up to me afterwards and shake my hand saying, I can't believe I ever thought we were on opposite sides of the fence. But I can tell you, the leaders of those organizations never wanted me to come back again because they didn't like seeing that. Danger. They thought I was going to steal congregants or something. And it's like, no, I don't need to steal anybody's followers because I'm not wanting to be followed.
Yeah, you're not tallying.
Right, I'm not a soul collector like a lot of the traditions leaders are, because your tradition is doing the same thing mine is if you look at it long enough.
Well, this is part of what I get bothered by when people act like there is no sort of negativity or evil outside of you, and if you're like seeing it or experiencing it, it's coming from you. Because I'm like, well, no, I mean, I really think there's like evil people and evil entities out there, and they're not me. So I don't really buy that. Where do you stand on that idea?
Well, I always go back to my old whenever I hear anybody throwing around that philosophy of like the worst one I hear is, there's no negative situations, they're just negative reactions. Oh, you mean
Eh,
like when you're being raped?
yeah, like for
You mean
example,
like when somebody's
murdered.
driving a dagger into your belly and
Yeah.
stealing your car? That's a ridiculous. That's goes back to what we talked about of basically people wearing blinders and not seeing what's going on,
Yeah.
and they just say, "Oh, really?" What that is victim blaming, is what that is,
That's a good
and
point.
it disempowers people to admit, I was wronged and I was taken advantage of. I was harmed by this individual. Now, sure, you have the option of how you react, but
Yeah.
we're all human, and we all have the same emotional capacity for the most part. So why shouldn't a person feel negativity when they're being treated horrible?
Yeah.
Now, should they do something about getting that toxic person away from them? Sure,
Yeah.
if they have the skill to know how to do it. But
Yeah.
when somebody's driven, let's say, a 10-mile road that's been curved all over the place, and they haven't been able to just be in a straight line, you can't tell them all of a sudden when there's a straight line in the road, oh, just go 100 miles an hour is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
They're going to be paranoid that
There's a
there's
curve
curves
coming.
in the road that they're going to wreck on.
Right.
So you can't just tell people to change their mind instantly. That's number one, it's victim blaming, and number two, it has no idea about human psychology, how it works,
Yeah.
which is why, going back to what we're talking about, people need incremental steps
Yeah.
to work their way up to getting to the end result, because you want to give yourself time to acclimate, I think would be the best term, acclimate to the system, to the techniques, to the methodology, and become comfortable with it, to where when you do feel the changes that will happen, and it's on a psychosomatic level, so it's full being encompassing, you're ready for it because you've read the scriptures, you've got um, people that have walked before this tradition saying, oh yeah, this is what you can expect, this is what's going to happen, this is when bliss comes about, you'll feel this sensation, don't worry about that sensation, don't get caught on this sensation. Like, for instance, when psychic powers arrive, when you do these traditions, that's one thing you don't want to get stuck on, because people can become very ego bound, thinking, oh, I've got these
I'm
godlike powers, and it's
special. Yeah.
right, I'm very special because I can really screw with people.
Yeah. Well, that is exactly another thing that bothers me. Whether someone has been practicing a certain tradition to get there or not, when people believe that their experiences are truly unique and make them very special, and it's like, well, in a way it does, because you're special. Everybody's special or whatever. But at the same
Right.
time it doesn't, because literally anyone can have those experiences, and so many people have had those experiences, and so it's cool and let's talk about it and whatever. But like, if you feel like you're better than people, or that people should be sort of like, wowed
Worshiping
by your
you.
presence. Yeah, like that's
Yeah,
annoying.
worshiping. Yeah, and it's all that is just a bunch more ego.
Yeah.
And you go back to what Milarepa, the infamous Tibetan saint, said, who was a master of these techniques.
Yeah.
He said a person who's acquired a high level should be like this giant boulder on a mountain. When the wind's blowing, it doesn't go along with it. So praise doesn't really move you a lot, and criticism doesn't really move you a lot either, because you're steadfast in what you're doing, and you don't let these winds of worldly fame or shame or praise or blame sway you either way, because it leads you down a very dark path many times.
And so ironically, many of the people who get a lot of attention are like the least advanced people, and a lot of the people who get no attention ever are some of the most advanced people. And a lot of the people, I think, who are sometimes seeking someone to teach them or to look up to or to follow or whatever, are finding those people who are really easy to find and really loud, and not finding the people who I think would be better. But I think that's part of the process too, and you kind of have to like see that for what it is and come to terms with like, okay, I don't actually want that, that's not working for me, in order to sort of get to the people who will actually help you get somewhere. And I also think there's this thing, and it relates to what we're talking about, where there's this structure, there's steps that you take, and there's sort of, many traditions that might get you, to a different place or a better place or a higher place along the way. And that's that idea that, like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I feel like I found that in my life over and over and over again. Even if I didn't even like know I was looking for a teacher or needed a teacher, it happens a lot. And what do you think about that concept?
Well, sure. There's the old adage saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah.
But you just as much as you don't want to be cocky about it, but you do want to somewhat test the teacher to make sure they're,
that's a good point,
worthy of trusting that they're going to pass a tradition on to you. Because I know I've dealt with some teachers in these traditions, and narcissism is the only term that you could use for these people. And not only were they narcissistic, but they were very sociopathic and very sadistic and abusive to their students. And these people can be they can be very alluring, because people want the secrets. But the problem is, the price is, it's not the form of selflessness that's healthy. It's the form of selflessness, and then a teacher shoves themselves in there and starts moving you around.
Yeah.
So you become nothing but a spiritual puppet to these people, and abuse almost instantly follows with them right away.
Yuck.
So there's a reason, people, oh wow, you have so much to offer, why don't you have a big school? Because I have so much to offer. Because that's not what I even when I had a big school in mid Ohio years ago, people would come to the school and they were like, okay, these people are very serious, and they would leave instantly. There was
yeah.
no, they were weeded out immediately because they would see what was going on. It's like, okay, these people are very serious about training in traditional kung fu and martial arts, and there was no fluff, and the injury waiver was very straightforward what was going to go on, and I would tell people, this is not ballet, this is martial arts. You're going to get bruised, broken, hurt, be ready for it, but what you get out of it's going to be a lot, and I'm never going to let you down. I'm always going to be there for you, and stick with it long enough to see, you're going to see the pattern repeat itself of, you can trust what I'm saying, because you're going to watch me do it every single time with every single person. The process is going to be steady. It's not going to be like, oh, I've got my special person.
Yeah.
It's not, that's when you get into that weird cult-like crap.
Well, and we're very much not, I think, prepared for that or used to that in the West in general. We're used to this very babying sort of like, everybody is special thing, like we were just talking about. Everybody's special, you're doing a great job even if you're not, and here's your reward at the end of the day, and here's your white belt even though you didn't actually do the things that were supposed to be done, but you tried, so here's your thing. Like, we're not ready for something that's like, no, you do this or you don't, or you leave, no one cares, like, do it right, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you how you're doing it wrong. And like, we're not ready for that, I think, in general, as students.
Well, I paid you money.
Yeah. Give me my diploma
money.
thing or
See
whatever.
you later.
Yeah.
Well, here's your check, ma'am. Take your kid and leave. What? Well,
Yes.
hold on. Well, what do you mean? Yeah.
That mentality. Whatever that entitlement, I guess, just straight up entitlement. Well, I feel like I waylaid you and got you onto all this other stuff, but what I know that you have a lot, I think we could probably talk for like 7 hours about anything, but is what else do you want to share about the sort of various traditions or practices that we could touch on?
Just one more last one to talk about.
Yeah.
The one of the more ancient traditions of this Solve et Coagula is going back to the Egyptian tradition, the most ancient story of Osiris and Isis.
Yeah.
Osiris was cut into many pieces. Solve And then Isis, the love of the woman, the divine female fire energy, brought him back together, sewed him back up, put him together, and then they had divine unity and gave birth to Horus.
The
So
light. Wow.
exactly right. Yes. Well, and when they've even seen when the sperm enters the egg, a flash of light happens.
What the fuck?
which is and this is what's so cool, because when you go back to the Tibetan tradition of the book called the Bardo Todal, or what most people know as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it talks about, and this is like an 8th century book, okay? It talks about that when the spirit finds a mother and a father that it wants to go into the light, when the mom and the father and the egg and the ovum and the ovum and the sperm unify, the light, the tunnel of light appears, and you go into it, and you are encased and you're reborn again.
Wow. That's a trip. There's something... Go ahead.
In that book, all that book talks about is how to embrace the light body and move beyond habitual, gross, finite thinking, and embrace this light body and go towards the ultimate light, which is like a heavenly rebirth, and moving on towards the more grosser, animal, hungry ghost, hell rebirths that your karma is pushing you towards, because your light body is mucked down with negative karma, or that black ooze that you've gained over lifetimes that you're carrying around.
Which we literally have to push out of us with the light.
Yep, and purge and squeeze it out. Yep, exactly right, because the darkness can't stand the light, it pushes it away. So this book, going back 1,200 years, even talks about these traditions. The Dzogchen traditions of the Bun go back to 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, talk about this stuff too. Yeah.
Well, and so maybe I'm wrong, but would the Christian equivalent be Jesus died on the cross, in a way he's sort of dissolved, and didn't Mary bring him and clean him, and then he turned into light and went up, or whatever?
Wrapped his wounds in the gauze. That story reappears in many, many, many traditions. It's not unique by any shape or form to the tradition. No, it was, I don't want to use the term bastardized, but it was adopted. Many traditions, again, you see this symbolic language used through all these traditions, because they're all trying to get to the same thing. Because when you look at the cross, okay, that's also an astrotheological worshiping device of the northern star in the sky, the way it moves through the seasons, the 12 zodiac houses, the 12 apostles. 33 is when he died. That's how many vertebrae that we have. The halo on the head.
Yeah. See, this is, every time I hear these things, it sinks in a little bit more. And every time you share something with me, I understand 12 other things a little bit better. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's funny how these things are just, they're sitting there literally just right there in front of everybody. And it's like, there's billions of people practicing it, but they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, oh no, we could be so much further along, but most of the leaders don't want that.
No, and I think they're sort of siphoning off anything that comes from it and giving it to some other entity or energy, and not.
Oh, sure.
Right?
That's getting into that dark alchemy. Yes, sure it is.
Well, and that's part of how I think we know we're in this dark age, is that, like we talked about the light age before, where everybody would be aware of these things and sort of practicing them all the time. And there's not it's their special locations necessarily, although there probably were very special locations, but to do these practices, but you just do them everywhere and are reminded of them in everything that your society has created. And we're at the opposite end of that, where nobody knows any of it. Very few people are aware. It's shattered into all these different fragmented kind of paths to it, throughout the world, and none of them sort of agree with each other externally. And we're very divided. And even the times we're sort of kind of going to get on the path and head towards the truth, someone's sort of siphoning that off. It's it's a very dark and chaotic time. And so what do you think? I guess we sort of touched on it, but what do you think is the way that regular people listening to this show right now and in the future could sort of try to combat that rising darkness or this dark age or the confusion?
As you know, as you said before, when there's a lot of chaos, going inward many times is the best thing that you could do. But to touch upon the darkness that you were talking about that's feeding on things, okay?
Yeah.
Because darkness is a parasite. When they looked at cancer in people's bodies, it actually takes away from the organization of the human body and reorganizes the system towards itself to eat the biophotons.
God, that's disgusting.
So if you can think about a dark entity entering a human being, it's literally eating your spirit and is attached to you like a cancerous growth.
It's very, very real. In other words,
it's very physical, and it's interlinked with your nervous system of your body and continuously traumatizing you and feeding and wanting to absorb biophotons and energy and life force from other people. God. They are parasites. It's not a symbiotic relationship by any state or form. It's very parasitical.
And it's not.
And that's where you get these possessions going on.
And we're not talking about this sort of metaphorically. This is literally, there's parasites.
Oh,
Cancer is like a form of it that we could maybe like touch and sort of see, but there's like every kind of level of existence. It's am I right? It's like echoed on every level of existence.
Yes. Yeah. But it's funny because it does the same thing every time.
Right.
And that's why when people are able to purge themselves of these negativity, it can be through song, prayer, resonating, going inward, other people laying hands on them, giving them their energy, vibrating at a higher frequency and pushing out the negativity that it has to be expelled from your body. So when people talk about raising their vibrations, that's actually what they're doing.
Yeah, actually raise your vibrations. So I like that you made that little list, that because I feel like sometimes when we talk about these dark things, some people are like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, for one, eat healthier, because that actually does help keep your body healthier and able to repel these things. But also the things you said, like prayer and music and dancing. I create art sometimes. I know you create art sometimes too. And it's like I think both of us are kind of similar in that sometimes we create things that are amazingly awesome, and sometimes we might create things that we don't even really like that much. But like just the act of doing it in itself is a method of, I think, meditation and focusing and sort of purging any negativity you might be feeling. And especially lately, I think it's hard sometimes for me, and I don't know if you're feeling this, but just all the things going on in the world, I feel like things are kind of magnified at negativity. And so it's been kind of hard for me lately, but I just force myself to do one of these things, go on a walk, look at the mountains, look at the sky, pray, sing, whatever it is, laugh. Sometimes I just make myself laugh. Even though it seems crazy.
Most people anymore don't go out and just look up at the stars.
Yeah, go look at the stars.
We have an ancestral memory of looking at the sky and living under it, to where an astrotheological belief system was at the root of what everybody did. When you look at Gobekli
Tepe.
Right. When you look at these places that go back to 10,000 BC, you're looking at an astrotheological, Stonehenge, whatever you want to call it. They're finding more and more of these places because people unified themselves with the movement of the universe. If you look at the tradition in China, the tradition goes back at least to 2600 BC. They had out of the river a malung, or a dragon horse like a hippopotamus or something came out of the Yellow River and bought the Hutu map, which is a tradition of the universal movements. And this was given to Fuxi and his sister Nuwa, and they were serpentine people that it looks like the caduceus,
Wow.
which is the spiritual Nagic energy rising up the spine to bring about awareness and consciousness. And this map is based on the number 9, which has to do with the constellations and the movement, which is where we get the 5 elements. Originally, it was 5 directions: center, north, south, east, and west, which has to do with the 5 elements, which is how the 5 elemental system forms a star or pentagram. The circle around has to do with destruction and creation phases, which is where you get the health practices of the Asiatic traditions, specifically from China. And then those were expanded into 8 directions, which has to do with what's called the Bagua or the I Ching.
Wow. And wait, where did the 9 come in?
The 5 was expanded into 9, and there is a physical pattern to what the 9 actually looks like when you draw it out. And that's even interesting because you can see that pattern repeated also, and it's actually a lot of triangles.
Is it the Sri Yantra? Sri Yantra?
No.
Okay.
That's just another geometric formation that's used in meditation, kind of like the one I just drew lately and posted in the red and the white along the same lines as that one. No, the pattern looks like
you're gonna draw it for us. And then I had another question waiting in my brain, and I think I lost it.
It kind of looks like this a little bit.
Oh, wow.
And it has to do with going to 9 places, and then those 9 places are center 8 around, and then that was denoted on the back of a turtle. And so they would heat up an iron rod and shove it into the back of a turtle shell, which would crack the shell, and then they would read the trigrams, which looks like this.
Oh, like the I Ching, which you
the
just
I Ching,
said.
yeah, and that's how they would read, because they denote movements of the universe, which denotes movement of a human being. And so you figure out, okay, I'm having a lot of water. I hit this, it shows me thunderbolt. I'm supposed to do this in sync with my body, in sync with the universe.
It's amazing, really, that these things are repeated literally everywhere we look, and in nature, in ourselves, in our mind, in our whatever. And it's what you were just describing with how people would sort of develop this over time reminded me of this quote that I'm going to butcher, but it's something like, "The mysteries of the universe can be revealed to any man in a moment." You know, like I feel like, right, as much as we've talked about that there's these traditions and there's steps and there's people and there's hierarchies, and you want to respect this and go through because that's like the best way to get to this sort of holistic understanding and internalized, you know, understanding. At the same time, I feel like any of these things can be sort of almost inspirationally realized from nature, from life, or from living and being just kind of aware and receptive, you know?
Well, our spirits can tap into the Akashic record at any time and download this information, because so when they looked at let's see, where's it at? So the connection between the biophotons, the reactionary of the cells, the biophotons can also help information be exchanged
Yeah.
between cellular structures to tell each one of them what to do. So you can maybe think of the Akashic records as a pool of biophotons that we download the energy once we get our focus into it well enough.
Yeah.
We can open it up and download it. And sometimes people do this more so in a dream state,
Yeah.
because it's more abstract and symbolic and not as concrete. So you're not worried about limitations, and your focus is more open to receive the download of information, which is where a lot of stuff we've gotten in our culture as human beings has come from these people who have downloaded stuff. A lot of physics has come that way,
Right.
and many other things in the world. So it's real. It's real.
Absolutely. I love that we came to that spot, because it's a great place to be. And I want to also throw out an idea for people if they're wanting to sort of start doing something. It's not like of any sort of tradition or anything, but it's just something I find helpful sometimes if I'm feeling really, whether I have like a sort of physical ailment, or I'm sort of like emotional or cloudy, or I just can't like get with it. I do a sort of visualization and meditation where I imagine the light sort of flowing into me however you want, like maybe from your head down, but I just kind of picture it like filling up my body all at once as I breathe in, and then as I breathe out, I picture all this, any blackness, negativity, blockage, sort of, illness, whatever physical ailment, like being pushed out. And I do that for a while, and that can kind of center me too. And do you have any kind of quick and easy visualizations or meditations that people could maybe practice if they're feeling mired down lately?
Well, you're exactly doing the correct one. And then they could maybe find a tradition that they like to recite a prayer or a mantra, or really even just one syllable. Om, hung. They can just take one syllable, just repeat it, and vibrate your being with your whole essence. And then if you feel like you want to do something, you can visualize that negativity being dissolved in yourself, and you can visualize breathing in the negativity from somebody else and breathing out positivity to them, and cleansing people also to help people you want to be healed. Maybe visualize them becoming well and healed also. That tradition is called Kong Len, which means taking and receiving and giving. And so you just visualize expanding your biophotons outward towards beings and giving to them to heal and purge them as well.
I love that too, because I think a lot of times giving to other people and focusing on other people actually makes us feel a lot better ourselves as well. That's cool.
Very healing. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I want to give people an opportunity to find you, around however they can. I know that you have at least one book that people can purchase and peruse, and I know you might have some sites that you want to share with people.
Sure. You can go to redlotustemple.net. That's the temple's main webpage, but you can also look up Red Lotus Temple on Facebook, and that's where the temple's teachings and links and things like I talk about here are put on there for the general public. You can also go, as people have seen when I come into the chat when you're having an episode, my YouTube channel, which is Mahadharmapala, Mahadharmapala, and there's many Qigong routines on there, and teachings about alchemy and teachings about social commentary and such that you can see on that channel as well. So there's 3 options. If you want to learn some of this stuff and you're interested in long distance learning, I can show you things via Skype. I educate people online that way around the world. And basically just email me redlotustemple@aol.com, or contact me on social media, and we can get together and I can tell you what it takes to learn this stuff, and I can more than happy to show you. There's also lots of documents and links I can send anybody if they want them, free of charge, of course, and can show you immensely amount how to do a lot of this stuff and get your own practice going to where you can be the benefactor of how much effort you want to put into it. And you can look up my name on Amazon to find all the books that are there available. Also on lulu.com.
Perfect. That's excellent. And I will just add that in my experience, it's nice if you do receive teachings from somebody to offer them something in response or in return. So it's a reciprocal relationship that you have. So I'll just leave people with that thought. And then what are your sort of final thoughts that you want to leave people with on the various alchemical traditions around the world?
They are treasure trove waiting to be embraced by everybody that wishes that transformation to purify whatever lead is in your life into gold and bring about a happier and healthier life, mind state, and spiritual world. And these traditions are all in English, easily, readily available for $10 to $20 for a whole book on this stuff. And it's well worth your time to buy it and embrace it and see that transformation happen in your life.
Amen. I mean, there's a reason why it's everywhere, and it's worth,
Yeah.
like you said. Absolutely.
The ground is laden with jewels. Just pick them up and go.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to the amazing alchemical Alan Cicco. Alan, it is always a pleasure to have you. You are such a treasure to the entire world. It's so nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to bloviate for 2 hours.
Anytime. Seriously, it's been too long, honestly. I feel like you haven't been on since like season 2 or something. It's crazy. So I'm glad that you're here again. I'm glad that you suggested this and that we both, had time and we're ready.
Yeah, I think it was the universe went plop.
Yep. It's perfect. Awesome. Well, there aren't any of us who can say that we haven't been some lead or leaden in our lives, at least much of our lives. And only some of us can say that we've worked to transmute that lead covered in shit into gold. But all of us are in that process, and none of us is barred from success. The path leads ever onward, and you're on the path, whether you know it or not. So take a moment to visualize your base and most defiled aspects of yourself, scraped clean, reformed, and changed utterly until they are unrecognizable. And take a moment to realize also that in knowing it is possible, and it has already come to pass. And until you raise yourself up to your highest place, which you will absolutely do, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Nasty motherfuckers with a hook and a sickle. Brought to you advertisement, bone-plated nickel. Fire rate, automatic smash from the get-go. Snack on the whack, fermented flesh disco. Abracadabra, archaic altars don't slabber. Hey, making jabbers with reality backwards. Hunting rap nerds, bodyguard collected actors. Munitions are famished, let them feast upon the dapper. Bloody bibs and muddy kicks, feasting on amygdalas. Iron fist, tyrant shit, APO will rip you up. The rhyme rainmaker, vein style backbreaker. Genghis-Khan depleted uranium satellite lasers. Cloaked in anonymity, I know you never heard of me. No rusted tools used for Crowley style surgery.
Dissect a whole set, God body. God taught me to dissect the whole body. When it gets sloppy, I'ma get there. Rhymes rare like steak, get crushed like crates to create 52 states. And it's Baghdad, dusted towels, no rags. Straight melt dash, dust to ash. Turbans while the niggas perkin'. It's on purpose, my service touches the sun's surface. And rainbows touch serpents. My light all night shines so bright. I'm a star for eons, Hollywood's for peons. Cause they try to copy the same shit we on. Hey, I ain't done yet. Lungs depleted and can't breathe, can't believe it. Trying to seek it while trying to peep it. It's a secret. Now you're nobody. Label somebody. Trying to claim John Gotti. It's yours truly, God body.